Chapter 10. State of inertia. Churned into months, Eliza Hawthorne's life took on a rhythm of excessive leisure and indulgence. The once dazzling world of high society, with its endless parties and social engagements, had begun to lose its allure. Eliza, now in possession of the cursed purse, found herself increasingly drawn into a world of comfort and inertia. Her house had become a sanctuary of idleness. The once bustling socialite now spent her days lounging in plush robes, surrounded by extravagant yet seldom used luxuries. Her mornings were marked by long, drawn-out breakfasts served in bed, and her afternoons were spent napping or engaging in trivial pursuits. The purse, which had once symbolized allure and ambition, now rested on a side table in her personal lounge, almost forgotten amidst the clutter of her increasingly stagnant life. Eliza's sharp ambitions had dulled, replaced by a profound sense of ennui. The purse, with its dark power, had begun to reflect her lack of motivation and growing sloth. Its dark elegance seemed to blend with the opulence of her surroundings, becoming an almost forgotten part of her daily routine. One afternoon, Eliza was reclining in a luxurious chaise longue, sipping a glass of champagne, and absent-mindedly scrolling through her phone. The purse lay open on a nearby table, its ornate design barely noticeable among the trappings of her decadent lifestyle. She had left it there while she attended to her latest distraction, a new novel she had taken up as an escape from her own stagnation. Her own inertia was creating a perfect storm for the purse's influence to take hold. She had become so accustomed to her lack of activity that she failed to notice when a particularly careless housekeeper named Mabel entered the room. Mabel, a seemingly unremarkable woman with an eye for the valuable and the misplaced, had noticed the purse's presence and was intrigued by its opulent appearance. As Anne remained fixed on her phone, and the haze of laziness clouded her judgment, Mabel's curiosity led her to approach the side table. With a practiced hand, she swiftly and silently lifted the purse, her heart racing with the thrill of finding something so valuable. Eliza's indifference allowed the theft to go unnoticed, as Mabel slipped the purse into her own bag, making a discreet exit from the penthouse. Almost imperceptible, Eliza, too wrapped in her own world of laziness and self-indulgence, did not notice the missing purse until much later. By then her thoughts were slow and muddled, hindered by the weight of her own lethargy. When she finally sought out the purse, a sense of unease washed over her, but it was too late, the purse was gone. Hands once again, it took on a new voice and a new word to reflect its current owner's state. In a low rumbling whisper, as Mabel admired her prize in the seclusion of her own modest home, the purse spoke with a dark authority. Ominously through the room, a chilling reminder of Eliza's own disengagement and the consequences of her unmotivated lifestyle. Mabel, initially ecstatic about her find, began to feel an unsettling heaviness in her newfound possession. The purse, though a symbol of wealth, seemed to radiate a dark energy that unnerved her. Mabel, to fully appreciate the purse's dark allure, found herself unsettled by its presence. The more she handled it, the more she felt an inexplicable pull, an urge to rid herself of the burden. Her life, already marked by modesty and toil, became intertwined with the purse's malevolent influence. As Mabel's unease grew, she began to experience strange coincidences and misfortunes that she attributed to the cursed object. Desperate to free herself from the purse's dark grip, she sought out someone who might take it off her hands. And so, in an unexpected twist of fate, the purse found its way back to Lydia Nightshade. Lydia, determined, had been keeping an eye on the purse's trajectory. She had known that the purse's influence would eventually lead to its return. When the opportunity arose, Lydia made a calculated move to retrieve it from Mabel's reluctant hands. Swift and discreet, Mabel, relieved to part with the object, handed over the purse to Lydia with a mix of fear and gratitude. Lydia accepted it with a knowing smile, her eyes gleaming with dark satisfaction. Of the purse once more, she felt its dark energy envelop her once again. The familiar weight of the object was both comforting and foreboding. The purse had returned to its rightful owner, and Lydia's control over its power was reaffirmed. The sensation and loss continued, with Lydia poised to wield the purse's dark influence with renewed intent. The purse, having experienced the effects of sloth and other sins, had come full circle, ready to unleash its dark powers once more. As Lydia prepared to embrace its dark allure, the echoes of its past transactions served as a reminder of the complex web of desire, idleness, and ambition that defined its cursed existence. Chapter 11. The Dispute of Greed. The heavy rain beat down against the windows of Mr. Morton's upscale second-hand shop, creating a constant drumming that matched the tension in the room. In the dimly lit parlor where the meeting had been arranged, shadows flickered across the faces of those present. The air was thick with unspoken animosity as the three sat around a polished oak table. Lydia Nightshade, disguised once again as Constable Adler, Mr. Morton, and Miss Isabella Rothschild. Lydia's face hidden beneath the brim of the constable's cap, leaned back in her chair and regarded the two adversaries with the air of someone burdened by an irksome but necessary duty. Her piercing eyes flickered between Mr. Morton and Isabella, both of whom were bristling with barely contained frustration. Clutching a silk handkerchief, dabbed at the sweat on his brow as he spoke, his voice trembling with both indignation and desperation. "Constable, I demand justice. That purse was rightfully mine, as agreed upon at the auction. Miss Rothschild's purchase was conditional, and the purse was stolen before the transaction could be finalized. She has no right to claim it." Isabella, across from him in a regal posture, narrowed her eyes at the shopkeeper. "How dare you accuse me of failing to honor our agreement? The price was settled. I would have made full payment if you hadn't pestered me like a common debtor. Your avarice delayed the process and made the purse vulnerable to theft." Of hand, signaling for silence. Her voice was calm but authoritative. "Enough. We're here to determine who holds the rightful claim to the purse. Let's not let emotions cloud the facts." Her eyes gleamed with a hidden satisfaction as she played the mediator, secretly reveling in the chaos she had sown. And as he leaned forward, pointing an accusatory finger at Isabella, "The auction was a formality. You agreed to pay £30,000, yet you stalled, asking for ridiculous concessions and additional guarantees. My shop's reputation is impeccable, and you insulted me by questioning my integrity." Isabella, her aristocratic disdain cutting through the air. "It was your greed that delayed the process. First, you insisted on adding absurd clauses, wanting exclusivity rights over any resale or display of the purse. Then you attempted to inflate the price on a whim. It's no wonder the purse was stolen when you insisted on haggling like a merchant in a bazaar." Mr. clenched, and his voice took on a pleading tone. "The purse is more than just an artifact. It's a piece of dark beauty, a treasure that deserves to be in a place of prominence, not hoarded away in some display case." Lydia practiced neutrality as the two bickered. Beneath the facade of the diligent constable, she was savoring every moment. The purse had done its work, stirring up the basest instincts in everyone it touched. Greed, envy, and pride all were on full display in the rivalry between these two. They were unaware that they were merely pawns in a larger game, one that Lydia controlled with a delicate hand. As Lydia decided it was time to steer the conversation. "Enough accusations. The fact remains that the purse is missing, and unless it's recovered, this dispute is moot. However, I must ask, what exactly did each of you hope to gain from possessing the purse? Perhaps if we understand its true value to you both, we can determine a fair resolution." Isabella suspiciously, but she answered first, her voice smooth and calculating. "It's simple. The purse is a statement, a symbol of refinement and taste that few others in my circle could ever hope to possess. It's more than just an accessory, it's a piece of art, and with it, I'd cement my position as a tastemaker among the elite." Unable to contain his disdain. "You're treating it like a trinket. The purse is a rare find, yes, but it's also a source of fascination, perhaps even power. The craftsmanship, the history, the whispers of occult influence. It's worth more than what anyone in this room understands. I wanted to curate it, to bring it into my collection where its value could truly be appreciated and studied." Lydia slightly, her fingers drumming on the table. "Both compelling reasons, but ultimately selfish. Perhaps neither of you deserves to have it." Mr. Morton and Isabella like a slap. Isabella was the first to retort, her voice laced with indignation. "You have no right to determine that. I am more than capable of protecting my investment, and I will not be cheated by some overreaching shopkeeper." Mr. rose in volume, his desperation showing. Investment? You are the one cheating me. I arranged the auction, I did the legwork, and I was willing to let the purse go only because of the extraordinary price you offered. Lydia, content to observe how the purse's influence had amplified their greed and vanity. She knew well enough that neither of them had a true understanding of the purse's nature. They were blinded by their own desires, unaware of the darkness that lay beneath the surface of their covetous dreams. Lydia finally said, her voice cutting through the tension. Neither of you will gain anything from bickering. I'll be conducting my investigation thoroughly, and until the purse is found, both of your claims remain in question. To protest, but something in Lydia's cold gaze made him hesitate. Isabella too seemed to sense that the conversation had reached a dead end. Lydia rose from the table. I'll be in touch. Rest assured the truth will come to light. As she made her way to the door, she turned back, her eyes gleaming with a hidden smile. And let's hope the purse is found sooner rather than later. After all, such a coveted item has a way of slipping through greedy fingers. With the room, her heart thrumming with satisfaction. The purse was right where it needed to be, back in her possession. She had no intention of letting it out of her grasp again, at least not until it served her deeper plans. For now, she would enjoy watching the turmoil continue to unfold, a storm of sin and desire she had masterfully orchestrated. As behind her, the echoes of greed and ambition lingered in the room, leaving Mr. Morton and Isabella to stew in their rivalry. The purse, though absent, still held dominion over them, an unseen puppeteer pulling the strings of their darkest desires. Chapter 12. The hungry void. The moon hung high and cold above the city as night draped itself over its streets. Yet, in the hearts of those who had touched the satanic purse, there was no such tranquil calm. Instead, a gnawing void expanded, a hollow place that yearned to be filled, despite its insatiable hunger. For brushed against its sleek surface, life had changed in subtle but devastating ways. They had all pursued the purse for their own reasons, glamour, status, power, but none of them had known what they were really inviting into their souls. A Roth's child. The memory of the purse's opulence haunted her day and night, though she possessed enough wealth to buy 10 of the finest bags from Paris or Milan. They meant nothing in comparison to the one that had eluded her grasp. Every purchase she made, every new piece of luxury she adorned herself with, felt like dust and ash compared to the allure of that purse. It was not just the purse itself, but the feeling it had invoked, the thrill, the dark promise of something more. Now, no amount of jewels or silks could touch that deep, aching void within her. Her parties, once lively and filled with admirers, had grown dull. Her laughter, once the center of attention, had become brittle, forced, as she tried to drown out the emptiness with excess. The purse had left a mark on her heart, one that widened with each passing day. Then Morton. The old shopkeeper's obsession was subtler but no less corrosive. Since the purse slipped through his fingers, he'd become consumed with thoughts of what he'd lost. Each morning, as he polished his wares and rearranged his displays, he felt a hollowness that nothing in his carefully curated store could fill. It was as if every other item had dimmed in comparison to the purse's dark allure. The elegant watches, the fine brooches, the rare trinkets, none could replicate the dark, forbidden promise of the purse. It gnawed at him, an obsession that grew sharper with time. In his dreams, the purse whispered to him, offering glimpses of power and influence if only he could claim it again. But each time he awoke, it was gone, leaving him sweating and grasping at empty sheets. The hunger within him had grown, festering into a restless, manic need that left him hollow-eyed and sleepless. Jude, who had first stolen the purse, now wandered aimlessly through life, plagued by a growing sense of inadequacy. He had been someone who prided himself on being clever, cunning, always a step ahead. But since losing the purse, he felt like a failure, a pretender who had been exposed. He found no satisfaction in his usual cons or quick schemes. They were meaningless distractions, temporary fixes that left him craving something he couldn't name. The memory of the purse, and the dark power it had promised, left him with a craving that gnawed at his soul like a persistent itch. He wanted more prestige, more thrills, more of the dark thrill he had felt when he first laid his hands on the purse. But he could never find it. It was as though the purse had taken a piece of him with it when it slipped away, leaving behind an emptiness that nothing else could satisfy. Eliza, heiress who had lost the purse in her haze of indulgence, now found herself plagued by a deep and gnawing dissatisfaction. Her luxurious life had become a prison. Once she had been content to drift through her days in a cloud of opulence and excess. But now, the emptiness gnawed at her, a relentless hunger that no amount of luxury could fill. Her indulgences, once sweet and soothing, tasted bitter. Her comforts had turned to chains. The purse had awoken in her a longing for something darker, something beyond mere pleasure. But it was gone now, and nothing could replace it. The void within her was like a bottomless pit, swallowing every pleasure and leaving only a bleak, gnawing hunger. And each of them, a relentless yearning that could not be named, a craving that grew more vicious the longer it was denied. The purse had taken from them more than they could have ever imagined, and yet each of them longed for it again, despite the emptiness it left behind. An object, it was a hunger incarnate, a dark force that thrived on desire. It planted seeds of longing in those who touched it, watering them with whispered promises until they bloomed into obsessions. But no matter how much one fed this hunger, it only grew stronger. The purse did not give satisfaction, only the illusion of it. Each person who held it found themselves yearning for more, digging deeper into themselves to find something that could never be found. It was a bottomless well of need, and the more one drank from it, the thirstier they became. Of the purse, it did not fulfill desires, it created them. It twisted the hearts of those who sought it, leaving behind only a gaping void where their contentment had once been. The more they desired, the more they lost themselves in that abyss. Back with Lydia, cradled in the hands of its rightful master. As she watched the chaos it had wrought, she smiled with dark satisfaction. The purse had done exactly what it was meant to do, spread its hunger like a contagion, leaving nothing but despair and emptiness in its wake. But it was far from finished. For the heart was vast, and the purse would never tire of feeding. Chapter 13, The Veil of Deception. Lydia Nightshade, now back in her grand manor on the outskirts of the city, relished the silence. The storm had passed, leaving behind a crisp, cool breeze that danced through the leaves outside her window. The purse sat on an ornate pedestal in her private study, hidden behind a velvet curtain, just one room away from where she meticulously crafted her next steps. That Mr. Morton and Miss Isabella Rothschild were still searching for it. They believed they were on the verge of reclaiming the elusive treasure, unaware that it had already slipped back into the hands of its true owner. They were merely pawns, obsessed, consumed by their own greed, and easily manipulated. Lydia smiled to herself, amused at the thought of them scrambling through dead ends and false leads. This was to ensure that neither of them could purse back to her. Her plan was simple but executed with flawless precision. Constable Adler had been flawless, an unassuming mask that allowed her to insert herself into their affairs without arousing suspicion. With the purse now safely returned to her possession, it was crucial that this facade be maintained. She had already planted seeds of doubt in both Mr. Morton and Isabella, leading them to question one another's motives. Let them chase shadows while she watched from a distance. Lydia began giving information. She arranged for rumors to circulate discreetly through the city's social circles. Whispers that the purse had been sighted in the hands of an eccentric collector in another part of the country. A few strategic bribes ensured that reliable sources confirmed these claims. The rumors spread like wildfire, sending Morton and Isabella on a wild goose chase far from the city. Themselves with fruitless investigations, Lydia took further precautions. She crafted an exquisite replica of the purse, an impeccable forgery that could fool even the sharpest eye. The imitation was flawless in its appearance but utterly devoid of the dark magic that infused the original. Once completed, Lydia stashed the counterfeit in a rundown pawnshop on the far side of town, paying the oblivious owner to keep it displayed prominently in his window. Should either Mr. Morton or Isabella get wind of it, they would be led astray, thinking they had finally found what they sought. Meanwhile, the purse remained secure in Lydia's hidden study, accessible only through a secret passage concealed behind a bookshelf. There, in the dim glow of candlelight, she would sit and admire it. The purse was no longer just a tool for her, it was a trusted companion, an extension of her will. It whispered to her, feeding her with dark insights and deepening her control over the threads of fate she so carefully wove. But then there. Lydia knew that both Morton and Isabella would eventually grow suspicious if they continued to come up empty-handed. So she began feeding them conflicting leads. She sent Morton anonymous notes hinting that Isabella had already acquired the purse, but was keeping it hidden until she could fully flaunt it at an upcoming gala. She fed Isabella similar misinformation, suggesting that Morton had spirited the purse away and was planning to sell it discreetly to an exclusive buyer. As she intended. Their growing distrust of each other deepened, and instead of uniting in their search, they turned against one another even more viciously. Each was certain the other was plotting something behind their back. Lydia's subtle manipulations fueled their paranoia, ensuring they remained occupied with their own schemes rather than closing in on the truth. Lydia maintained her guise as Constable Adler, the diligent but ineffectual officer assigned to assist them in their search. With each meeting she played her part perfectly, expressing feigned concern, offering false reassurances, and subtly directing their suspicions elsewhere. Her mastery of deception was unmatched. They were utterly convinced that she was an ally, when in truth she was pulling the strings. In the fact that Lydia never needed to lie outright. She merely guided their existing fears and desires, allowing their greed to do most of the work. As long as they remained distracted and divided, the purse was safe. More importantly, it was back in her hands where it belonged, feeding her with its dark power, whispering promises that only she could truly understand. Moonlight spilled into her study. Lydia would sit alone with the purse, its presence a comforting weight on her lap. She would run her fingers over its supple leather, the faint warmth of its infernal energy sending shivers up her spine. She could feel its hunger, its need for more souls to corrupt. Soon enough she would let it loose again, allowing it to find new victims to tempt and consume. But not yet. For now it was hers, and the city's restless souls would have to wait. As she lit a candle, Lydia cast one final glance at the purse before drawing the velvet curtain back over it. The darkness was complete once more, and so was her control. Motion and her enemies chasing ghosts, Lydia allowed herself a rare moment of satisfaction. The purse was more than just a source of power, it was the perfect instrument of chaos, and with it she would continue to twist the lives of those foolish enough to covet what could never be theirs. But for now, Lydia was content to play the long hand, knowing that when the time was right, the purse would be unleashed once more, ready to devour anyone unfortunate enough to cross its path. Chapter 14. Julian's Descent. Julian's apartment was a wreck of torn cushions, upturned furniture, and shattered glass. The once tidy space had been gutted by his frantic search for the purse, drawers yanked from their cabinets, books strewn across the floor. Even the wallpaper clawed at in a fevered attempt to uncover any hidden compartment. Clothes lay in disheveled piles, mirrors were cracked, and the stench of stale sweat hung in the air. He had torn apart every corner of his home, convinced that somehow the purse had slipped from his grasp and was mocking him from some forgotten crevice. But there was nothing, no trace, no clue, and the emptiness drove him mad. He room, eyes wild and fingers twitching. The flickering light bulb overhead cast jittery shadows that only amplified his unraveling state. It had been days since he last slept. His thoughts were consumed by the purse, its luxurious texture, its beguiling design, and, most of all, its dark power. He couldn't stop thinking about it, couldn't push aside the gnawing need that clawed at his insides. He hissed, it, pacing faster. I had it in my grasp, my fingers wrapped around it, feeling the pulse of its energy, mine. And what did I do? I let it slip away, let it be stolen like a common fool. But no, that was a mistake, a temporary setback. I can fix it. I will fix it. Whipping around to glare at his own reflection in the dusty mirror. His eyes were bloodshot, hair disheveled, and cheeks gaunt from days of neglect. But his reflection wasn't what bothered him, it was the hollow emptiness behind his own gaze. That void had grown deeper since losing the purse, gnawing away at him like a festering wound. He could feel it, a craving that could only be satiated by the purse, nothing else. I need it, his voice trembling. It's the key to everything. With it I could rise above these wretched fools. Isabella, Morton, They don't understand its true worth. They see a pretty trinket, a status symbol, but I see the power beneath. I am the one who should wield it. And pacing again, muttering under his breath, as thoughts tumbled out in a feverish stream. His mind raced through half-formed plans, desperate schemes and wild ideas. There were people he could use, connections he could exploit, back-alley deals he could make. But none of it mattered if he couldn't get his hands back on the purse. It was all he could think about. Once everything changes, he whispered, his tone shifting from frantic to conspiratorial. No more scraping by, no more begging for scraps. I'll be at the top, rich, powerful, respected. They'll have to acknowledge me. They'll come crawling to me for favors, begging for a taste of what I can offer. His manic glee at the thought. I could build an empire. No, I will build an empire. The purse will be my weapon, my tool to carve out a place for myself where I belong. I deserve it, don't I? I've paid my dues, suffered enough indignities. It's my time now, my turn. The pace, faster and more erratic. Julian's mind was a storm of ambition, resentment, and desperation. He replayed every moment of when he'd first held the purse, the rush of power, the seductive allure of the whispers it had breathed into his mind. It had felt like holding destiny itself in his hands, and that sensation haunted him now like a phantom. He growled, clenching his fists. But I won't be thwarted again. I'll find it, and when I do, I'll take back what's mine. No more distractions, no more mistakes. I'll get it, no matter the cost. Darted to the worn map pinned to his wall. It was covered in red circles and frantic scribbles, a network of rumors, sightings, and dead ends. He'd been chasing shadows for days, following whispers of where the purse might have gone, but all his leads had fizzled out. Still, he couldn't stop. The hunger inside him wouldn't allow it. They're, he muttered. None of them can see the truth. They think they're playing a game, but I'm playing something bigger, something real. It's a test, isn't it? A trial. The purse wants someone who's worthy, someone who's willing to do what it takes. I just have to prove I'm the one. His thoughts spiraling into darker territory. What if someone else found it first? What if Lydia or that damn Morton got their hands on it before he could? The thought sent a jolt of panic through him, followed by a surge of rage. He couldn't allow it. He wouldn't allow it. No, slamming his fist against the wall. It's mine. I deserve it more than anyone else. I've sacrificed, I've suffered, I'm the one who's paid the price. They have no right, none. He's chest heaving with ragged breaths, as the room seemed to close in on him. The silence was suffocating, the emptiness inside unbearable. He needed the purse, needed to feel its weight in his hands again, needed to hear it whisper to him, telling him how special he was, how much he deserved. His thoughts turned darker still. If someone else did get to it first, well, he'd just have to take it from them, wouldn't he? There were ways, ruthless, underhanded ways. He wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. He'd already come this far. What was a little more blood, a little more treachery, if it meant getting what he craved? Not my way, he whispered to himself, eyes alight with feverish determination. Not them, not anyone. It's my destiny. The person I are bound together, it's mine by right, and I'll do whatever it takes to reclaim it. He could hear it now, the dark rumble of a voice echoing in the back of his mind, urging him on, feeding his desires. It was faint, a distant hum, but it fueled his madness. Jeweled into a twisted grin. He was close, so close. And when he finally reclaimed the purse, nothing and no one would stop him from taking everything he believed he deserved. Chapter 15. Henry's Calculated Distance. Henry Beaumont had always prided himself on being a man of reason. He viewed himself as above the base instincts that seemed to control those around him: passion, greed, envy. As a successful businessman, he had learned long ago that emotional impulses were liabilities in the cold world of commerce. It was better to keep desires at arm's length, to flirt with them just enough to glean what was useful without being drawn into their snares. So, as about the purse had reached his ears, he was intrigued but cautious. The stories of its exquisite craftsmanship, its rumored powers, and the desperate lengths people would go to obtain it, All of it piqued his curiosity. But unlike the others who had been swept into obsession, Henry approached it with the detached interest of a collector. He told himself that his motives were purely strategic. After all, every piece in his collection served a purpose. Each item carefully chosen not just for its rarity or value, but for the story it told about his taste and discernment. The purse was no different. If it was indeed as remarkable as they said, then having it would only enhance his reputation. He could showcase it at one of his soirees, allowing the right people to marvel at his find. Perhaps he would keep it for a time, let its allure do its work, and then part with it when the right offer came along. To Henry, everything had a price, especially when handled with patience and foresight. But behind these thoughts, a small, nagging part of him wondered. Why had so many fallen so quickly under its spell? He had heard of Isabella's reckless splurge, Julian's frantic desperation, even Eleanor's indulgent obsession. There was something more at play, something beyond what could be easily quantified or reasoned through. And though he wouldn't admit it aloud, that uncertainty troubled him. But deter him from investigating further. At least, Henry's surface, cool and calculated. He made discreet inquiries, reaching out to those who had come into contact with the purse. He expressed his admiration for its elegance, his appreciation for its craftsmanship, but always with a carefully controlled air, just enough admiration to keep people talking, never enough to reveal any personal yearning. He was alone. He allowed himself to imagine holding it in his hands, running his fingers over the fine leather and gilded clasps. What secrets could it hold? What stories could it whisper to someone savvy enough to listen? The thought excited him, but only mildly. He refused to let it become anything more than a distant curiosity. It was strength that set Henry apart. He watched from a distance as others spiraled into obsession, their covetous desires spiraling into ruin. But Henry? He was above all that. He could see the game for what it was, a delicate dance where the purse was the lead, and he was content to remain a careful observer, stepping in only when it served him. He attending the gatherings, showing just enough interest to be in the conversation without ever becoming the conversation itself. He marveled at how easily people revealed their desires once the purse entered their orbit, how greed clouded their judgment, how desperation ate away at their dignity. It was a study in human nature, and he was the detached scholar, taking notes and waiting for the right moment to make his move. If indeed possessed dark powers, Henry told himself that they would not sway him. He was immune to such things, guided only by logic and reason. If there was something valuable within the purse, he would extract it without losing himself in the process. It was just another asset, another object to be evaluated, traded, or discarded, nothing more. Or himself, but of his superiority, there was a subtle change, a faint stirring of interest that wasn't entirely rational. The more he learned about the purse, the more its mystique tugged at him. The questions he had once dismissed, what could it really do? How had it come to be, began to loom larger in his mind. He could still brush them aside, of course, but they lingered at the edges of his thoughts like shadows waiting to grow. Henry's last meeting, a small gathering where Lydia herself was present. Her presence was magnetic in a way he found hard to ignore. There was a subtle knowing smile on her lips whenever the purse was mentioned, as if she held secrets none of the others could fathom. Henry studied her from across the room, intrigued not by her, but by the confident way she carried herself, as though she already owned everyone in the room. He drew the purse from her coat, handling it with practiced care, letting the light catch its intricate details. There were gasps from those around, a collective hush as eyes locked onto the object in her hands. But Henry remained at the back, arms folded, outwardly indifferent. He was careful not to approach too closely. The purse, however, seemed to have a way of commanding attention no matter where you stood. It beckoned in subtle ways, an almost imperceptible pulse of energy that made the air hum with tension. Lit toward him for just a moment, as if daring him to come closer. He felt a chill, but he ignored it. He wasn't like the others. He wouldn't be baited by cheap tricks or showmanship. As he left the gathering, a part of him couldn't help but replay the image of the purse in his mind. It was captivating, yes, but what really piqued his interest was its history, its unknown origins, the tales it could tell. Perhaps it was time to dig deeper, to see just what it was that made the others lose their minds. But never him. He was different. Himself. Chapter 16. Eleanor's Discovery. The bell above the pawnshop door chimed with a hollow clang as Eleanor stepped inside, brushing rain from her coat. The air was thick with the mingled scents of dust and old leather, mingling with the faint metallic tang of tarnished silver. It was a far cry from the opulence she usually surrounded herself with, but desperation had led her to places she would once never have deigned to visit. Sleepless nights since losing the purse, her thoughts fixated on its sumptuous design and the strange gnawing hunger it had stirred within her. Despite her loss, the need remained, a relentless craving that twisted her mind. She needed that purse, or at least something like it. She told herself it was about reclaiming her dignity, about possessing something extraordinary. But deep down, she knew it was the void in her chest, a void that nothing else had been able to fill. Dingy and cramped, filled with an assortment of forgotten things, tarnished candelabras, cracked porcelain figurines, stacks of old vinyl records. It wasn't the kind of place Eleanor would have ever set foot in before, but she was on a mission, driven by an insatiable need. Her eyes roved over the cluttered shelves with growing impatience, dismissing each item as unworthy. But then, in a dusty glass case near the counter, something caught her eye, a flicker of recognition that sent a shiver down her spine. There, or so it seemed. It was equal to the one she had lost, the same sleek leather, the same gilded clasps, the same subtle aura of something otherworldly. Her breath caught in her throat. For a moment, the world narrowed to that single object. Could it really be the same purse? How had it ended up here of all places? The questions swirled in her mind, but one thought quickly overshadowed them all. I must have it. Her fingers trembling as she reached out to touch the glass case. The purse glimmered under the dull light, its allure undeniable. The more she looked at it, the more her heart pounded in her chest. It was slightly different from the original, something in its details not quite matching what she remembered. But it was close enough, and the longer she stared at it, the more it seemed to call to her, whispering promises of fulfillment. A wiry man with a shrewd, calculating gaze, he watched her with interest, sensing her desire before she even spoke. He asked, "Look," practiced. She struggled to find her voice. "That purse," she finally managed to say, pointing at it. "How much?" To the purse and back to the knowing smile tugged at his lips. "Ah, a fine choice," he drawled, as if he had been expecting her all along. "A rare piece, that one. Genuine leather, gilded trim, and, well, let's just say it's got a certain history, not something you'd find in most places." "History?" Eleanor snapped, her composure slipping. "I want it. Name your price." His voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "This isn't the sort of item that sells for mere money, miss. It's for those who truly understand its value." She could feel the hunger gnawing at her, an almost physical ache that seemed to grow stronger the longer she was near the purse. "I do understand," she hissed. "You have no idea what I've been through, what I've lost, because of a purse just like that one. I'm not leaving here without it." The showbrow, clearly pleased by her desperation. "In that case, it's yours, for a steep price. Let's call it a test of commitment. This is not an item for the faint of heart, you see." Eleanor was ready to empty its contents. "Whatever it takes," she said, her voice quivering. "I need it." As payment, a sum far greater than the purse's apparent worth, the shopkeeper's eyes glittered with satisfaction. He unlocked the glass case and lifted the purse out with a flourish, handing it to Eleanor with exaggerated reverence. The leather was cool beneath her fingertips, its surface soft and supple, and for a brief moment, the hunger in her chest seemed to ease. She felt a surge of triumph. This time, she wouldn't let it slip away. "The shop is a crooked one. Take care, miss," he said as she clutched the purse to her chest. "It's not always what's on the outside that counts." Already lost in the rush of possession, cradling the purse like a precious treasure. The world outside the pawn shop was a blur as she walked back into the rain, her mind racing with thoughts of what she might unlock within this new acquisition. There was a power in it, she was certain. It was almost the same as the original, almost, just close enough to rekindle that insatiable desire. Streets, and resolved that this time, she would be more careful. She would guard the purse with every ounce of willpower she had left. This one would fill the void inside her, she told herself. This time, she wouldn't let it slip away. Yet close, a faint whisper echoed in the back of her mind, a whisper that sent a chill down her spine. She pushed it away, refusing to listen, but the whisper persisted, low and ominous. Matter. She had the purse now, and that was all that counted. Chapter 17, The Indifference of Eliza. Eliza reclined lazily on her worn velvet chaise, flipping through a dog-eared magazine with the kind of disinterest usually reserved for laundry detergent commercials. The evening light filtered through her heavy curtains in muted tones, casting the room in a comfortable gloom. Around her, empty teacups, discarded novels, and half-finished knitting projects cluttered every available surface. Yet, despite the disarray, Eliza felt nothing but a quiet, untroubled satisfaction. The person everyone was so obsessed with had come and gone from her possession without so much as a ripple in her routine. It had been elegant, sure, but Eliza found elegance tiresome when it required effort. The purse had promised so much, had dangled endless possibilities before her eyes. Yet all it had inspired in her was the vague notion that it required too much attention. When it inevitably slipped out of her possession, she hadn't given it a second thought. A shock interrupted her idle reverie. Eliza sighed deeply, the kind of sigh that precedes a great personal sacrifice, and finally dragged herself to her feet. After a few more insistent raps, she shuffled to the door and opened it a crack, peering out with mild curiosity. Threshold was a stern-looking police constable, her uniform crisply pressed, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed spectacles. The woman's presence was commanding, yet there was something unsettling about her, a shadow behind her polite smile. It, Lydia in disguise. Good evening, the constable said in clipped tones, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to obedience. I'm Constable Warren. I've come to ask a few questions regarding a missing item, an item that was reportedly in your possession recently. Taking a moment to process the intrusion. Oh, what item? She asked, sounding as though she were asking about the weather. The person replied, her voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. The one that has everyone so worked up. Against the doorframe, stifling a yawn. Ah, that old thing. What about it? Lid narrowed imperceptibly. We have reason to believe you may have been the last person to see it before it disappeared. A witness claims they saw you with it. Eliza, small O of realization. Oh, right. I had it for a bit, I suppose. Can't say it was all that memorable. It was nice enough, I guess. But I didn't see the point in fussing over it. It's probably better off with someone else who cares about that sort of thing. Lisa, her smile sharpening into something more predatory. But surely you must have sensed that it was no ordinary purse, Miss Eliza. It's quite unique, special even. Don't you feel the slightest urge to reclaim it? It could offer you so much. Head, her expression one of exaggerated boredom. Honestly, not really. It seemed like a lot of trouble for something that's just a bag, even if it's a fancy one. I didn't feel any great attachment to it. Lydia faltered for a brief moment. She could sense the purse's faint remnants in Eliza's aura, proof that it had indeed been in her grasp. But how had this woman remained so utterly unmarked by its power? Lydia's disguise slipped for a fraction of a second, her eyes darkening with frustration, but she quickly regained her composure. Eliza? Lydia said, her voice oozing false sweetness. Most people who come into contact with such a treasure find themselves utterly captivated by it. And yet, you seem entirely unaffected. Eliza, innocently. Oh, I'm sure it's wonderful for someone else, but it sounds exhausting to be all worked up over it. I've got my little comforts here, and that's enough for me. Lydia raced as she studied Eliza. It was rare, almost unheard of, for someone to interact with the purse and walk away unscathed, untouched by greed, hunger, or desire. Was it laziness, or something deeper? Was Eliza's indifference a strength, or simply an inability to care? Lydia found herself both intrigued and infuriated by this woman who had somehow slipped through the purse's grasp. "The certain they saw you with it last," Lydia said, trying once more to ignite a flicker of concern in Eliza. "If it's returned to the rightful owner, perhaps even to you, you could find yourself with something far beyond what you have now." Eliza gazed over as the constable droned on. The words sounded hollow to her, like someone trying too hard to sell something she didn't want. She simply couldn't muster the energy to care. "Somewhere," she said with a shrug. "If someone else took it, good luck to them. I've got a cozy spot here, and a good book waiting for me, so if that's all, I'd rather not be bothered." Froze, her eyes flickering with frustration. "Indeed," she said, the edge of menace creeping into her tone. "You are a most curious woman, Miss Eliza." Eliza politely, barely stifling another yawn. "People do say I'm one of a kind." Darkened ever so slightly. "Well, Miss Eliza, I shall take no more of your time. Just remember, should that purse find its way back to you, it might be wise to take better care of it," Eliza said with a wink. "Though I make no promises, things have a way of wandering off around here." Another word, the door clicked shut. For a moment, Lydia stood motionless, staring at the door with smoldering irritation. Eliza's indifference gnawed at her like an unsolved riddle. How could someone simply brush off the purse's influence, ignore the temptations it offered? As Lydia walked into the deepening twilight, she was left with a gnawing sense of incompleteness. Eliza's resistance wasn't natural, there was something off about it. But for now, Lydia couldn't afford to dwell on this anomaly. There were still others out there, still those who hungered for what the purse could give, who would unravel themselves to possess it. The game, even if Eliza refused to play. Silent vow as she left. One day, she'd uncover the truth behind this woman's immunity. And perhaps, just perhaps, she'd find a way to finally break through Eliza's disinterest and make her crave what she had so casually let go. Chapter 18. The bitter battle. The rain had begun to fall in heavy sheets, drumming a relentless rhythm against the windows of Mr. Morton's upscale second-hand store. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with tension that rivaled the storm outside. Lydia, still disguised as Constable Warren, stood at the center of the chaos, her expression a blend of satisfaction and subtle cruelty. Store. His brow furrowed in frustration as he clutched a stack of legal documents. Miss Isabella Rothschild sat on an ornate velvet settee, her perfectly manicured hands clutching her own bundle of legal papers, her face a mask of steely determination. The two of them were caught in a legal battle of epic proportions over the purse, a battle that had consumed their lives and drained their resources. "I believe it," Mr. Morton said, his voice rising in a mixture of exasperation and disbelief. "After everything we've been through, you just waltz in here and declare the purse has been found?" Lydia's gaze lit as she surveyed the scene. "Indeed, Mr. Morton. The purse has been located, and, as per the regulations, it must be returned to its rightful owner." "And Isabella demanded, her tone dripping with suspicion. "You can't simply expect us to take your word for it." Lydia, cool and unfazed. "I believe you both claim to have had rightful ownership. However, due to the complexities of the situation and the extensive legal fees involved, it appears that the purse will not be returned without a legal resolution." The legal rang quickly after Lydia's announcement. Both Mr. Morton and Miss Rothschild had embarked on a relentless campaign to claim the purse, hiring top-notch legal teams and engaging in a public spectacle of litigation. The battle was fierce, with both parties throwing every conceivable argument, every accusation, and every penny they had into the fray. The team had argued that the purse's rightful place was in the world of high-end antiques, where it could bring prestige to his store. They had cited the store's reputation and Mr. Morton's years of dedication to the art of curating fine objects as evidence of his suitability to possess such a unique item. On the other, Bella's legal team had asserted that the purse, after being purchased at the auction, rightfully belonged to her as a token of her wealth and status. They had presented arguments about the purse's symbolic value, and its potential to enhance Isabella's social standing, thus making her the rightful owner. Weak court proceedings had led to mounting legal fees and the slow erosion of both parties' financial stability. The once luxurious lives of Mr. Morton and Miss Rothschild had become consumed by court dates, depositions, and media coverage. Their once gilded reputations had become marred by the public spectacle of their bitter feud. Astronomical. Mr. Morton's store, once thriving, now teetered on the brink of bankruptcy. His assets were liquidated, his property seized, and his future as an antiques dealer was left hanging in the balance. Isabella Rothschild, too, had faced financial ruin. Her vast fortune dwindled as she threw every last penny into the battle, her social circle shrinking with every lost battle in court. Of amusement and calculated satisfaction as the two adversaries squared off. She had managed the situation with a masterful touch, her control over the purse's destiny proving to be a delicate dance of manipulation. It had been a pleasure to observe both parties unraveling under the strain of their greed and ambition. Approached, Lydia stepped forward, her voice calm and authoritative. "It seems the time has come for a decision. The court has ruled that neither of you will retain the purse. Instead, it shall be relinquished to its previous owner, myself." The shock and Isabella's faces was palpable. They had fought so hard, spent so much, only to lose everything. The purse, once a symbol of their desires, had become the catalyst for their downfall. Lydia, with a dark satisfaction, "I trust you both have learned a valuable lesson about the cost of unchecked ambition and desire. The purse is a powerful artifact, but its true power lies not in its elegance or value, but in the consequences it can bring." As Miss Bella watched helplessly, Lydia took possession of the purse once more, her fingers caressing its luxurious surface. The purse seemed to respond to her touch, its dark essence resonating with the very core of her being. The storm raged on, echoing the turmoil within the store. Lydia's departure was as enigmatic as her arrival, leaving behind a trail of ruin and regret. The purse, now back in the hands of its true master, continued to loom as a dark symbol of the desires and downfalls it had witnessed. As away from the store, her mind was already on the next chapter of her twisted game. The purse had proven to be a powerful instrument of manipulation, and its saga was far from over. The world would learn, in time, just how far the influence of such an artifact could reach, and Lydia would be there to watch, with a satisfaction that only came from knowing the true price of desire. Chapter 19. The hollow echo. Eleanor sat at her dining table, a grandiose display of opulence before her. The table was set with fine china, crystal goblets, and an array of decadent dishes, roast meats, rich pastries, and towering layers of cream-filled confections. It was a feast that would have impressed even the most extravagant of hosts. But today, Eleanor was not merely a guest at this banquet, she was the self-declared queen of indulgence. The which she had acquired from the pawnshop rested beside her on a plush velvet chair. It was an imitation, a mere shadow of the original, yet Eleanor clung to it with a fervor that bordered on desperation. She had convinced herself that its presence would rekindle the magic of her past indulgences. With action, Eleanor reached for a piece of cake, her fingers trembling slightly as she anticipated the sweet taste. As she took a bite, her eyes fluttered with pleasure, but something was amiss. The thrill she remembered was absent. The cake, though delicious, did not transport her to the euphoric heights it once had. Eleanor continued to graze over the feast, but instead of the satisfaction she sought, she was met with an unyielding emptiness. She poured another glass of champagne and drank it quickly, only to find that the rich bubbles offered no escape from her growing discontent. Her figure had begun to betray her past habits. Where once she had been admired for her elegance and grace, her reflection now showed signs of neglect. Her face had grown rounder, her cheeks fuller, and her once flattering attire now strained against her expanding form. The mirror, which had once been a source of vanity, now reflected the consequences of her gluttonous habits. As herself, she found that the pleasures she had once sought with such fervor were now tainted by a gnawing sense of dissatisfaction. Her eyes roved around the table, seeking solace in the food that had once been her greatest joy. Yet each bite, each sip was accompanied by a bitter realization. The magic of the purse was gone, and with it, the ability to indulge without consequence. Purse, clutching it tightly. The imitation, though similar in appearance, lacked the enchanting allure of the original. It was a hollow vessel, devoid of the dark power that had once sustained her excessive desires. The moment she had tried to embrace its influence, she was met only with the harsh reality of her own indulgence. Anna threw herself back into her chair, the sound of her sigh mingling with the clatter of silverware. "Why is it not working?" she muttered to herself, her voice tinged with desperation. "This isn't how it used to be. It's supposed to fulfill every craving." Her gaze falling on the sumptuous spread that seemed to mock her from every angle. The once coveted food now appeared mundane and unremarkable. The grandeur of her surroundings, once a testament to her indulgence, now felt like a prison of her own making. Consumed with reckless abandon, her body grew heavier, her movements slower. Each bite seemed to weigh her down further. Each sip added to the burden she carried. The imitation purse, despite its appearance, was powerless to offer her the release she had once experienced. Eleanor knew the truth. The real purse was gone, and with it the enchantment it had bestowed upon her. The replica was a mere facsimile, a shadow of the true artifact's power. Her past excesses were no longer the source of joy they had once been. They were now a reminder of her insatiable desires and the cost of her gluttony.